what if we could understand the nature of God by looking at things like our breath and respiration and genealogy and the way that life propagates down through generations? What if we use the hermetic law of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without, to understand have a deeper understanding and awareness of how God descended down into us and may descend back up? This is gonna, trust me, this is gonna blow your mind. Okay, now this is an intellectual exercise. I'm not stating this as unequivocal fact. This is something that, but these types of things are things that should sit with you. The ideas that I'm going to be presenting is a synthesis of multiple different lineages, thoughts, esoteric traditions, from Gnostic Christianity to the Jews or the Hebrews, Kabbalah, to the hermetic law of correspondence, to human anatomy and physiology, to genealogy. All right, so let's dig into this. I call this, again, the breath of God. So we talked about the hermetic law of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without. If you start trying to see through that lens, you can understand so much of the world. Things mirror each other, and we can see the mirror image of the small in the large. So the microcosm, if we are relating ourselves to God, we are the microcosm. We were created in God's image, okay? We are the fractal microcosm of God, the macrocosm. Micro meaning small, macro meaning large. Okay, so for the sake of, you don't have to be Christian or Jewish or believe in Judeo-Christianism, but for the sake of simplifying this, we're just going to start with, this is humanity, okay? This tree, this family tree, hopefully most of you have seen a family tree. This is the human family tree, starting with Adam and Eve, for the sake of simplicity. Okay, so we start with Adam and Eve, they have kids, and then, so this all spider webs down to all the lower levels to current humanity, okay? So what we also see here, interestingly, is that as we breathe in, it has a very similar structure to human anatomy and the way that we breathe in. So we breathe in life, and it forks out into first the bronchi, then the bronchioles. So there's a network of, basically a network of airways that then terminate into bronchioles, and that is where you truly absorb that the breath that you are receiving and pull it into the body to nourish the body, okay? And so let's talk about God. Let's think about God. Now, the cosmology, these things are out there too. Some people will say we are a fragment of God. We are a fractal of God. Let's start at the beginning. Let's entertain that idea, okay? So in the Gnostic Christianity, in Gnostic cosmology, at the very top, God is ineffable source. It is, it does not have a personality. It is undifferentiated, pure awareness, okay? It is totality, everything existing in and of itself without differentiation. Then they believe there's Barbelo, which is self-awareness, witnessing the awareness. So from that splitting off, now that there is a witness to the awareness, it creates the divine child. And in Gnostic cosmology and some other thoughts, that is believed to be, this is the Christ principle, sometimes even Jesus Christ himself. And then below that, we have the pleroma, or the aeons, where the aeons exist. And these are not personalities per se. These are more like archetypal forces like justice, wisdom. Okay, Sophia is becoming more popular. Sophia is an aeon, and she is actually the one that, in the cosmology of the Gnostics, she, against God's will, without her divine counterpart, she had her own child, kind of like the bastard child of the universe, called Yaldabaoth, or the Demiurge. And the Demiurge created this world. And so this world, in that school of thought, is corrupted. But it has the spark of the divine in it. And Sophia, as a part of her redemption, she is trying to come and help us return back out from this decayed, perverted, basically unauthorized version of divinity back into divinity. Okay, so then we have the angelic realms, and then the created worlds, and then we have humanity. So if we look at the tree of life in Kabbalah is kind of the same thing. That Kether is absolute source. And these are different manifestations of reality, all the way down to Malkuth, which is physical reality. We are the densest as it gets. We are distilled light into the most dense form, which we call physical dense matter. Okay, so you can see that there's stratification of God, a descent further and further from the ultimate pure divinity into heavier and heavier layers and further separation of God from himself, where we are behind the veil. We are cut off from our connection to God. We do not have remembrance of it. We are completely separated from God. Now, we can have direct spiritual experiences and transcendent experiences where we touch God, but largely we are cut off. We are at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. That is not only in the Gnostic cosmology, but also in Jewish Kabbalah as well. Okay, so how is this all relating to the lungs? So if we get down to it, we are God. We are God having forgotten itself. We are a fragment of God. Now, some people won't take it that far. I'm not stating anything as a fact, or we're just exploring this, okay, as thoughts. But to entertain that thought, if we think of God, undifferentiated source, it gets kind of boring, right? It gets kind of boring. You're just living in pure awareness. God wants to experience himself, explore himself, understand himself better. Well, how does he do that? Because he is aware of everything. Well, he fragments off into further and further levels of fragmentation, from the pleromas to the angelic realms. Now, the pleroma and the pleroma is directly connected to God or source. The angelic realms, they are also in direct presence of God, but the created worlds mostly are not, and then humanity is completely severed off. So you can think of life as descending down. So God is experiencing himself. Think of the family tree. We start with two progenitors. Through bloodlines, we are able to descend and experience multiple lives, multiple experiences, whole worlds inside of this bloodline of one that starts with one progenitor, two progenitors. And so God, as we descend and fragment into fractal fragmentations, God is experiencing us through himself. You could think of we are, right now, we are the little roots coming off of the lungs, and God is breathing in. This gets a little wild. As God, you could think of as God is breathing in. He breathes in and nourishes himself by separating out into a network of experience, of separation. So we descend into all these different individuals, people. The breath of God descends into all these networks, all these nodes. And ultimately, at the very end of that process, after having breathed all the way in, and those lungs are saturated, he has the full ability to understand through vast amount of experiences, through multiple individuated individuals and consciousnesses. Why does that sound weird? And then after that saturation, after those, all of that fragmentation, that nourishes God. That gives him, if we go back to, that gives him the ability, he has experienced himself fully. Oh, wow, that was one breath of God. I descended down into matter, into all these individuated souls. It nourishes his spiritual body. And then comes the return. Then comes the fractalized pieces begin to return to source. They wake up. They start discovering that they are a part of the divine, and they have their return back home into source, back into nothing. Now we can go into the Big Bang Theory, and you can think of, if you want to subscribe to that thought, again, we're entertaining thoughts. If God was this Big Bang, this infinitesimal point before the Big Bang, all of awareness, all of consciousness, all of matter condensed into one single infinitesimal point, now it explodes into the universe, into the cosmos. And what happens in that period? There's a whole host of developments of life forms and worlds and suns, galaxies, planets, life forms. And then what happens? Eventually, there's the thought, we don't know. There's a lot of scientists that say that there won't be a collapse, but some scientists think that there will be a contraction back into that infinitesimal point. So it's like the breath of God. God breathes in, expands out into the world, and creates this world, experiences itself, and then contracts back into himself. So it's like your lungs. So again, if we are made in the image of God, if we are the microcosm, then we would mirror what God is doing. And sometimes that is quite a leap or an abstraction to understand, but this makes sense to me. So, and we ourselves, on a personal level, go through this level of fragmentation. Whether through our life, we go through trauma, we go through very difficult experiences, we separate ourselves, we have parts of our psyche that are split off, we have the shadow self, we have repressed parts. And if we work through those things, we return to wholeness, we return to our full self. So the story of our return to wholeness is God's return to wholeness. And we are a fragment. We are a little bronchial. We are like, you could think of also like when God is, if this is God, right? As God is breathing in the breath, you could say the breath is, within the breath are little oxygen molecules, right? You could say every soul is an oxygen molecule. I just came up with that as we're talking here. So that's a interesting thought too. And so all these oxygen molecules are a fragment of God. God is split off into souls to go out and to nourish his body, to make experience so he can come back. All right, so the fractal nature of the universe, this actually mirrors even psychology. So more and more we're seeing how the fractal nature that the universe is not only mathematical and holographic, but that it is also fractal. So there is a book, where did I put that? This book, A Fractal Epistemology for a Scientific Psychology. And these are a collection of essays. And this is actually published by Cambridge Scholars Publishing. And this was very difficult to get my hands on. I had to buy it from the UK, directly from the publisher. But more and more, we're seeing that life is fractal. So whether it's the genealogy of starting from source and descending down into the story of humankind and a whole bloodline, there will be the return back to source. Or whether it's the lung breathing in oxygen to saturate the lungs, the bronchioles, absorbing that nourishment and then exhaling or returning to consciousness, to pure undifferentiated source. So we've talked through God experiencing self through layers of separation, descent, fragmentation, return home to wholeness. I think that covers everything. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I am fairly confident that you've never heard anything like this. This is kind of merging multiple esoteric systems and cosmologies across history and introducing some unique points too. So if you enjoyed this video and these kind of explorations, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment. Again, I'd love to hear what you think. All right, see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.